to awaken the body, we also want to awaken the mind. And as you know, the topic of my blog and my YouTube channel has been holistic health and biohacking for many years. And in today's episode, we're getting back to this topic of longevity. I interviewed Dr. Nick Bitz. Nick is a naturopathic physician who specializes in Ayurvedic medicine, and he's also Senior VP of Product Development at Neurohacker Collective. We talk about longevity, our gut ecosystem, and the connection between our gut and our brain, and how all of this can help us to live longer, more fulfilling, healthier lives. So enjoy this episode with Dr. Nick Bitz. We're going to talk about health today, longevity, the gut-brain connection, a lot of things you're an expert in. And I want to quickly introduce this topic, basically back to this podcast and to this YouTube channel. I've been talking on my YouTube for 5 years on nootropics, on supplements, holistic health. And I see a lot of spiritual people who are kind of not that interested in working on the body. But in my sense, there's such a deep connection actually between spiritual awakening and awakening the body, working on the body and the mind. So that's why we're having this conversation today. And I like to get your thoughts on that. Why should we care about our bodies for awakening?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic topic. I think the conversation is just now starting to emerge among health enthusiasts. And so I think it's important to be a part of that conversation. So I love that you're talking about these things, because usually when people are talking about awakenings, it's something that they don't really talk about. It's something that's very personal. Their path is an inward path. And so I like that these things are coming outward and we're having conversation, and just makes it a little bit more real. And it creates community, and I think it creates progress ultimately. It depends on how you define awakening. And I think there's a lot of different ways to define awakening.
That's a good point. So yeah, maybe we should start with that.
I think, you can take a very simplistic approach, or you can go on the other side of the spectrum and take a very esoteric approach. Simplistically, you could just talk about what is an awakening. It's just to be awake. And I think of that as having a very strong life force, to be filled with energy, with purpose, with passion. And so to be awake then is to be filled with life. And that's, I think that's a very basic way to look at it. And that's great. I love that. But if you go to the other side, I think you can get much more esoteric, much more deeper. What comes to mind for me right now is the word enthusiastic. It comes from the Greek word enthusios, which means in and God. So it's this sense of God within. And so an awakening then is just, it's divinely inspired. It's something where you're possessed by God, you're embodied, that those different qualities, that joy, that happiness, that clarity. But again, awakening doesn't need to be divine oriented, but I certainly think it can be. I tend to look at awakening from the yogic or maybe even the Ayurvedic perspective, maybe with a sprinkling of, different religions like Hindu or Buddhism or some of the mystic branches of Christianity. I'm deeply aware of Kundalini awakening, which is that serpent power that lives at the base of your spine. And a lot of the yogic philosophies are built around how do you awaken that energy so that then you gain that enlightenment. You become more awake and you see things as they really are. But ultimately, that esoteric stance is just looking at awakening as this really profound or transformative shift in consciousness and awareness. And it's moving your focus from yourself into something larger than yourself. And so I think once you move into that perspective, it really sets you on this really definitive path that's really fun and interesting. I will say though that to your point, physical health then is intimately tied to awakening from my perspective. I think that if you can create a healthy body, you can then greatly improve your chances of having a healthy brain, a healthy mind, a healthy spirit, and all of those things. So I think that the starting point for this journey is having physical health, and physical health is the basis of Ayurveda. Ayurveda is the form of medicine from India. It's 5,000 years old, and it's really geared around creating physical health so that people then can make progress on the path to awakening or enlightenment.
Yeah, totally. So about defining awakening, I think I'd mostly agree with what you said. I shared my own story of awakening in the previous episodes of this podcast. For me, it was awakening to the divine love that is always there and around us, if we remember it, if we tune into it, and if we sense that I am not the identity, I'm not Max, I'm something bigger, but the identity of Max is still there, and I still have a body, so still want to work with that and keep that as healthy as possible. And I think one of the reasons why I awakened and had, for example, also such an intense positive experience with ayahuasca, and then also this awakening afterwards in a meditation course, I think it was because I worked 10 years on my health before, because I was working on all these things. And I would even go so far, I know you guys don't claim it at Neurohacker, but I would even say that Qualia Mind actually helps with awakening, because for me it just helped me to focus and to deepen in meditation. And I can definitely sense the difference on days where I took it versus where I didn't took it, in terms of like how deep am I getting in my meditation and how stable can I hold this even outside of the meditation.
Yeah, I love all of that. You know, I think that your Qualia, which is the name of the Neurohacker brand, Qualia is that subjective inner experience. And so your experience of the world, how you experience everything, really dictates how far you can go on that path. You know, if your mind is obscured, or your mind is too chaotic, or you're not able to buffer the effects of stress, that really is going to hinder your progress on the path. And so I think it is critically important to focus in on the mind and on cognitive performance overall. And so I would say that nootropics do give you that advantage. And so they give you that first step in that spiritual path. And again, from my perspective, the purpose of meditation is to really focus the mind overall and to be in control of your mind. And if you can control your mind, that gives you great advantage. You're not bound by the reaction to the experience of mind states. You are in control of your mind states. And so what I love from Ayurveda or from yoga is the concept of gunas. And they are these energetic qualities of the mind. And there's 3 of them. And there's Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva. And so yoga and Ayurveda is all about promoting Sattva, which is that peaceful state of mind that then allows you to progress towards awakening. And so we know that there are botanicals that promote that mind state. We know that there are foods. We know that there are lifestyle choices. And so I think at the core of Ayurveda, the core of yoga is this idea of really cultivating that state of sattva in the mind, which is that clarity, that peacefulness, that's critically important.
So in the past, you went to India, is what I read about you. Can you tell us about your journey there and how this related to your own awakening?
Yeah, that was a really formative trip for me. You know, leading up to that trip, I was, really trying to focus on my health. As a child, I had a pretty detrimental back injury that I was having trouble moving beyond, and I couldn't find relief. I pretty much did everything from a conventional medicine standpoint and didn't find any relief. I did fortunately discover traditional Chinese medicine, and I discovered the idea of self-care and energetics of the body, energetics of food, energetics of botanicals. I employed pretty drastic dietary changes. I did some water fasting, juice fasting. I moved into organic food choices. And I did see my health return. And so for me, I got a glimpse of it at that moment. But it really wasn't until I started studying yoga and Ayurveda that I think that I really deepened my sense of health and my health status overall. And so going to India for me was really a deep calling, and I really wanted to learn the ins and outs of both Ayurveda and yoga, and to work with the physicians that are over there to make sure that I'm learning it from the source rather than just books. And so I did study naturopathic medicine up in Seattle, and naturopathic medicine isn't any one thing. It encompasses really everything, from diet, lifestyle, botanicals, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, homeopathy. But Ayurveda was that one piece that just grabbed me, and it became my focus when I was up in Seattle studying. And so I consciously took off, time from my studies in between the preclinical and the clinical phases of my study to go to India to live and learn. And so I was able to move into an ashram, to work with a guru, to learn yoga, to work in an Ayurvedic hospital, to learn panchakarma detox therapies, and to really just get really well versed and to experience firsthand that medicine. And so, of course, the intent is to learn it so that I can then provide that medical service to others. But really, the intent too is to heal myself, to take that knowledge, to use it, to apply it for myself, which I did. And so going to India for me really just, I think, helped to solidify my health journey.
A huge trending topic at the moment is longevity and also increasing our lifespan. Maybe you can explain us the difference between lifespan and health span, so we can start into the conversation about longevity, because I think there's so much to it, and I just don't want to get older, also healthy.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, so lifespan and health span, two really interesting terms and concepts. Lifespan, in short, is the total number of years that we live. I think the intent is that we all want to live to 120, but you want to live in a way that's healthy. You don't want to be in poor health for the last part of your life. And so that's where health span comes in. And health span, in essence, really is the amount of time or the number of years that we remain healthy and free from disease. And so it's, in the literature, in a technical sense, it's called disability-free life expectancy. And so both lifespan and health span have been increasing over time. Right now, they increase about 0.1% per year. So over the course of a decade, we'll see a 1% increase in lifespan and health span. And so in the US, where I'm based, people are living to about 78 years. But their health span is much lower. So they live healthfully until about the age of 65. So there's a big gap of 13 years where people are living unwell. They're not healthy. And so that is a problem. And I think that is a focus right now in medicine, at least in the US. We're focusing on how do you improve health span overall so that the health span can close the gap on lifespan so that you live healthfully until the end of your life.
So the word longevity Would you equal that with health span or lifespan?
I would say it's both. It's more directly related to lifespan. And so usually when people mention longevity, they're talking about how long a person lives. But I think the goal is to really merge health span and lifespan into one idea, that you live healthy until the end of your life.
Yeah. And coming back to awakening, I feel, the question could be, what's the point of living long and healthy when you don't have a purpose in life? And I feel like awakening it's quite a good purpose to have in life, to follow that path, to be motivated by that.
I totally agree. What I like from the Ayurvedic philosophy is they've laid out the different phases of life, and so it is abnormal from an Ayurvedic perspective to pursue enlightenment from a very young age. It typically is something that you do in the last phase of your life, usually 50 years or older, after you've had a family, you've had a career, you've done your studies. It's always this last phase.
So you realized all the things from the hierarchy of needs, and then you realize, there's still something I could do. I'm still not fully fulfilled and happy.
Right. And then you shed everything, right? And then you let go, you surrender, and you try to merge with the cosmos. I think that is awakening from my perspective. And I love that Ayurveda has talked about this from a life phase perspective. I know in the early 2000s, my goal was to gain enlightenment. That I was adamant. That's what I was doing. I was doing 10-day silent meditation retreats. I probably did a dozen of them.
Did it help?
It certainly grounded me in the practice. It made my mind a little bit more calm. I definitely touched it. I touched something much larger than myself, which is a deeply motivating factor. I think if you don't have...
So you got some glimpses of a higher vantage point.
Yeah. I mean, it's... The meditation has probably been the most valuable thing. And I often will say that if I recommend any one thing for people to grab a hold of on your health journey, it's to get a meditation practice, which we can talk about all day long. But really, it's to become well-versed in one tradition. Don't do it on your own. Tap into a tradition with mentors, with community, with a technique that's tried and true. And so there's a lot of different techniques. Find the right one that's specific for you, that matches your temperament, your personality, your time schedule, all of those things. And then just to keep using that tool. And so I often use the analogy of digging holes. You can dig a little hole here, you can move over here, you can dig a little hole. But the goal ultimately is just find one place and just keep digging that hole until you hit water. And so find your tool and just stick with it. Be consistent. And so meditation has been incredibly valuable for me personally. I will say, so as fasting, whether it's a water fast or a juice fast, so have psychedelics, those moments when you can just catch a glimpse of something much larger than yourself. That's deeply motivating.
Yeah, I just had to think about Jeffrey A. Martin's course, 45 Days to Awakening. I did also a podcast on that. And he also shared with us that the people that are the most happy and the most healthy and have the lowest stress, they have the highest chance of transitioning to awakening. And they actually measured that within their groups and their studies. So I can definitely see the correlation there. And trying different types of meditation makes a lot of sense to me. Jeffrey describes it in a way that every method only works for a couple % of people. And so people should try out different methods until they find their fit. And then, as you say, deepen in that and use that to awaken.
So can I ask you a question? So what form of meditation then are you using personally?
Well, since I awakened last year in Jeffrey's course, I am doing a method they call sinking in. So I basically focus on what Jeffrey calls location 3, layer 3. That is that there's universal divine love everywhere, that I feel everywhere in my body, but I also feel it everywhere in space. And I basically take a nice bath in that and enjoy this. But it's because I'm already connected to this. So to get in there, in Jeffrey's course we did, I don't know, 15 different methods over 8 weeks. And before this, I'm a Buddhist for over 10 years. So I followed different paths and schools and lamas and rinpoches in Buddhism. Went the route of shamatha and like through different levels of that. Yeah, that's what I did before. And for me, I could notice in my early 20s when I joined a Buddhist Sangha and started meditating with them, just how my life changed. I mean, I was in my early 20s with this super active mind and all these ideas about life and emotions and problems and challenges and huge goals and huge neuroticism. And really through understanding, I am not my thoughts, I am not my emotions, but I can witness them. That's interesting. I could like really sense over the years how this like slowly helped me to grow. And in my 20s, I had friends already interested, let's say, in plant medicines and psychedelics. And I always felt like, I'm not so interested in getting this peak for like some hours and then falling back. I like really enjoyed doing the meditation every day for a couple of years until I, tried out plant medicines as well.
Yeah, I think there's wisdom in that. Plant medicine is powerful, but how do you integrate that and how do you carry that on without tools after a ceremony? And I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, that's what I see is unfortunately missing for a lot of people who go to ceremonies, the integration. Because it seems to be even a trendy thing. I recently saw a TikTok where someone made a story about their ayahuasca journey. And it's even this trendy thing that people do like every 6 months or 12 months. And there's huge, tremendous value in that. It can be a huge healing experience and people can download and have insights. But I think it's really important to sit back on the cushion afterwards for some months at least, every day, maybe an hour a day would be good. That's what I generally recommend people afterwards, yeah. Let's go back to increasing our health span and talk about our gut and the gut-brain connection, our gut ecosystem. You are an expert on that, so can you start give us an overview about what is our gut doing, what is the gut ecosystem, and how is it connected to our brains?
Yeah, for sure. So going back to where you started, that question was about health span and how to increase health span, which I think is it motivates me right now. How to bridge that gap between health span and lifespan, and I often will talk about the 3 B's, and that's something that I talk about frequently. Move your body, move your breath, and move your bowels. The bowels obviously get into the gut, so I think that's a nice transition point. But when I look at how to increase health span in the most impactful ways, in the most simple ways, it really comes down to those 3 things. And I learned that from one of my mentors, Dr. Robert Svoboda, who is an Ayurvedic physician that I deeply respect. But moving your body, every day, important. Walking, running, bike riding, having a yoga practice, anything that really gets your heart pumping and your blood circulating, that engages your muscles, something as simple as maybe just even 15 minutes per day. That just creates a really important foundation for health. and then moving your breath. That can be passive. That can be, watching your breath in meditation. Or it can be more active, like deep belly breathing, alternate nostril breathing, which is a yogic practice. There's a lot of things here. I think the breath is the way to access the nervous system and to really shift the nervous system from sympathetic into the calming parasympathetic state, which in the modern world is critically important. I would say we spend way too much time in that sympathetic state. So the best way to undercut that, no doubt, is through the breath. And then moving your bowels. I think it's important to have at least one well-formed bowel movement every day. It's important to have it at the same time. It's important not to have too many bowel movements, nor to skip. Most people will notice that that it happens directly after the morning cup of coffee. Which is fine.
The coffee helps some people, huh?
For sure. It stimulates gastric acid. It moves the gallbladder. It moves the pancreas. It increases intestinal motility. It does shift your microbiota, the bacteria as well in the gut. But generally speaking, within about 30 minutes of having a cup of coffee, people will have a bowel movement. And I think I read somewhere that drinking a cup of coffee is about equivalent to a 2,000 calorie meal in terms of its impact on the gut. So pretty profound. So coffee is a good tool, but it's important.
Can I ask a question there? Does that effect increase when you do a biohacking coffee, a bulletproof coffee with extra fat?
I haven't seen it. I would say that it's, a lot of the compounds in there tend to simply just stimulate the things that we need to have a bowel movement. But I wouldn't say that there's anything special that you need to have in your coffee to have that effect. That hasn't been my experience at all.
Studies have to be done on that.
Yep. And an important point, though, is that you don't want to use coffee as a crutch. It's an incredibly powerful tool. It increases longevity. It's the greatest source of antioxidants, at least in the American diet. It's a really important dietary component, but don't use it as a crutch to have a bowel movement on a daily basis. And so having a bowel movement is
Don't use it as a crutch for waking up, I would say as well.
Yes. I mean, if you're lacking vitality, you shouldn't have to drink coffee all day to maintain your energy, right? That's false energy. And so that carries us over into the gut ecosystem, which is endlessly fascinating from my perspective. The gut is it's this hollow tube all the way from the mouth all the way to the rectum. It's basically, if you cut it open and spread it out, it would be the size of a basketball court or a couple tennis courts. And so there's a lot of surface area. But this tube is just layers. It's really ingeniously designed. There's the mucosal layer, which is inside. It's kind of in the hollow part of the tube. Then there's a surrounding submucosa. Then there's muscles, and then there's connective tissue. And it's like that all the way down. Within the muscles are the nervous system, and so scientists often refer to that as the second brain. Because we're gathering constant information from within our gut and communicating that back up to the brain. And so that's the enteric nervous system, which we've defined as kind of the gut-brain axis. There's constant bidirectional communication from the gut up to the brain and from the brain back down into the gut, which has enormous implications for health. But it all starts with gut health. And, when you start getting into the gut, like what lives inside the gut, it gets super fascinating. We have trillions upon trillions of bacteria. We also have, a variety of viruses and worms and fungi and other organisms that live there as well. We don't know a lot about the other non-bacterial organisms, but we know a lot about the bacteria, and we continue to learn more and more. The bacteria weighs about 3 pounds in our gut, which is the same as the brain. So there's a lot of information there. We know that these bacteria, each one of them has a set of genes that we rely on. And those genes obviously produce proteins, they impact enzymes, they have biochemical pathways. They give us our physiology, the human body, they give us a lot of function, and we rely on those bacteria for our day-to-day functions. And so we have this really interesting symbiotic relationship with these bacteria that are in our gut. And so we're starting to pay attention to what that means. What does it mean to have a healthy gut, to have a healthy microbiome?
What does it mean? Can we go in there? Like, how do you know your gut is healthy?
Right. So, I mean, it's hard to say what precisely constitutes a healthy gut. But one thing that researchers know for certain is that diversity is critically important. And so maintaining diversity of the microbiome is a primary goal for medicine and for health practitioners right now. We know that, currently people lack diversity. There was a study that was recently published about hunter and gatherers in Tanzania. And they collected stools and they analyzed those stool samples, and they found that these hunter and gatherers have over 700 different species of bacteria. And to compare that, if you look at people from California, which is where I live, people here only have about 200 species. And so we've lost a lot of the bacterial species that we've really evolved with over time. And these hunter and gatherers still have them. They're innate to their GI tracts. And so diversity really just makes you more capable. It makes your gut microbiome more resilient, more adaptable.
So does that come from the, let's say, diet? Like that people just eat the same food all the time? Or what would your explanation be for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of things. They're obviously not exposed to antibiotics. They're eating a much more diverse diet than we are. Right now, I just read a study last night that 75% of the world's diet is based upon 12 plants and 5 animals. And so we've gone from this enormous palate into a very narrow frame, and people eat the same thing every day. So there's no diversity.
Yeah, it's funny. 2 weeks ago, I was in Germany at the forest guide training, and we were in the forest, and I learned like you can eat a lot of things that grow in the forest. You could just take a leaf and eat it. There grows something, you can take it and eat it. And I never knew about it, and I think most people are totally afraid of picking anything in the wild and eating it.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think, these people they have their hands in the dirt. There's good bacteria, there's spore probiotics in the dirt. It's in the dust, it's in the air. They're obviously, again, not exposed to antibiotics. They're eating a lot of prebiotic fibers, especially resistant starches that have virtually gone away from the modern diet. They are doing a lot of fermented foods because they need to preserve their foods. And of course, they're not getting a lot of the things that we get in the diet: glyphosates, artificial sweeteners, things that we know can really shift the gut microbiome.
Yeah. So coming back to a healthy gut, like how do we know it's healthy?
Yeah, so there's no definition. I mean, even when you get into dysbiosis, which is abnormal gut microflora and an imbalance, we don't even know what that means, because there's no one fingerprint of the gut microflora that we know is healthy overall. I think there's 2 different people that are overall expressions of health. They can have very different expressions of the microflora. So we don't know quite yet. We know generally which bacteria are better than others. We're starting to uncover some of the keystone species that are critically important. And we know that people that have a higher propensity of these keystone species, they have much better health overall. And so we're trying to figure out.
So they're basically a marker for your gut health or for overall health?
I would say that is a true statement. Yeah. And so they're only found in small quantities, but they have this disproportionate large effect on health and impact within the gut ecosystem overall.
Mm-hmm. How many of these keystone species are there?
Oh boy, I mean, I probably could say there's easily at least 20 in the literature, but there's probably 3 or 4 that are primary that everybody's talking about, that we're starting to research more and more. Akkermansia is one of them. Akkermansia is it's new to me. I've been doing a deep dive here in the last month. But it's very interesting. It's inversely correlated to everything under the metabolic spectrum, which is about 60 diseases, intimately related to type 2 diabetes. And so there's some really good studies coming about how we can improve that. You can't take Akkermansia orally because it's an anaerobic bacteria. And so we're discovering ways that you can increase the gut, not using probiotics, but using prebiotics. So feeding them the right food, or feeding surrounding bacteria the right food, so that then their metabolites can feed the Akkermansia and grow. And so it's really incredible. That organism lives within the mucin, kind of the mucus layer inside the gut. There's also a species called F. prosnitzi, which has implications for inflammation. There's another one called Rhumococcus, which is deeply important for inflammation in the skin, including acne. So we're just now starting to get into this. The science is just now emerging. You really don't find them in probiotic products yet, because as I mentioned, they're anaerobes. So any kind of exposure to air will kill them. So it really makes them impossible to put them in a lab, scale them up for mass production, and then put them into a capsule or a powder. But again, as I mentioned, we're finding a lot of different ways that we can modulate.
So you mentioned there are like other species around, and you try to have more of them. So the keystone species, how does it work? They try to eat them, or how does it work?
So the keystone, it's thought that these keystone species are the center of biofilms, and biofilms are these combinations of bacteria that live inside the gut. And so they live in really close quarters with other bacteria. And so if you feed, let's say, a bifidobacterium, a certain type of fiber, a prebiotic fiber, it will ferment it, and it will create these byproducts. The byproducts will then be used by your own cells, but then also those keystone species and the other bacteria in that area as well. And so it's an indirect.
So you're kind of producing food for them.
Exactly. In a way, exactly. Yeah. So keystone species are fascinating. And again, we're just now getting into it. I think you will see some of the keystone species arriving in the marketplace. There's a lot of time and money and R&D that's being spent right now trying to stabilize these organisms so that we can put them into capsules.
And so they would be legal as food supplements?
They would, yeah. You got to go through the processes to make sure that they are approved. In the U.S., they have to be approved through the FDA, which is, you need to show that they're safe. Which isn't impossible. It just takes some time, usually about 12 months to present the studies and to do the science. So we're getting there. In the EU, it's going to be much slower, obviously. Yeah, no, I know. You guys for a while couldn't even sell probiotics over there.
Yeah. The EU seems to be a bit more tight when it comes to supplements. Yeah. So I'm happy that there's Qualia Mind European version at the moment.
I'm happy it's over there as well. Yes.
What else do we need to know about to understand the connection between the gut and the brain. How does our gut influence our brain?
Again, I always come back to the Ayurvedic perspective. How does Ayurveda think about the gut brain? And Ayurveda, of course, says that the gut and the brain really are one. And again, it's great that science now is getting around to confirming that fact. But, the brain tissue, from an Ayurvedic perspective, it is physically formed by the digestion of food. And so food moves through these 7 different phases, and eventually at the end, the brain is formed. And so Ayurveda has talked about that, again, for thousands of years. And we're just now, from a modern perspective, we're just now getting to that idea. Something that I find is really interesting from an Ayurvedic perspective is when you look at the energy of food. I've talked about this briefly, the 3 gunas, the sattva, rajas, and tamas. And so Ayurveda is concerned with what is the energy of the food that you're consuming, because that energy leaves an imprint on the mind and it creates your mind state. And so again, one of the beautiful aspects of Ayurveda is that they have gone in and they've defined the energetic properties of every food known to man. And so we know which foods you should consume in order to create your mind. So critically important. And then I think it's a critically important from an Ayurvedic perspective, too, is that they talk about the origin of all disease starts in the intellect. It starts in the mind. So we know what we should and shouldn't do, but we violate that wisdom, which creates imbalance, and it starts in the gut specifically. It is interesting when you get into the literature and you start saying, did Ayurveda know anything about the microbiome? Did they talk about it in the literature? And they really didn't, which is fascinating to me. So it wasn't part of their worldview per se. But when you get into some of the kind of the canon remedies that are widely used in the Ayurvedic perspective, we know that they work through the microbiome. So there's a remedy called Triphala. Triphala means 3 fruits, and it's a classic GI tonic used in Ayurveda. It's really the cornerstone of any Ayurvedic regimen. And these 3 fruits are rich in polyphenols, and polyphenols feed the microbiome. And we're just now learning that. And so in part, Triphala is working as a GI tonic through its modulation of the microbiome. Another ingredient is turmeric. It's widely known that turmeric is not a bioavailable ingredient, which is why people will often combine it with a black pepper or some kind of fatty acid to make it more absorbable. But in Indian medicine, that was never a concern. They knew that just giving turmeric powder was going to have an impact because, again, it has these polyphenol compounds that's feeding the bacteria and it's working as a prebiotic, which is absolutely fascinating. And then, there's something called panchakarma, which is a detox therapy that, again, is a cornerstone remedy or therapy in Ayurveda. And what they put in those enemas were bacteria. They used fermented milk in the form of a lot.
They were using enemas in Ayurveda?
Yeah.
Thousands of years ago already?
Yeah, totally. So panchakarma means 5 actions. It's how you get rid of these toxicities that we build up over time. And vata, the vata energy, it tends to reside in the colon. And so the only way to get rid of vata then is to make sure that you're moving your colon on a daily basis or by using an enema. So it's super fascinating. And again, doing any kind of enema will shift your microbiome. And so when you get into it now, you can reflect backwards and know that, in fact, Ayurveda was very concerned with shifting the microbiome, but they didn't know it at the time.
Wow, fascinating. Yeah, it's funny, my own health journey somehow also started with Ayurveda in my early 20s. Went to an Ayurvedic physician in Germany where I lived, and she told me, hey, you have way too much pitta and stop eating spicy food. Yeah, so, but I really don't remember much of that because I didn't went deep into that path, but it was somehow my journey to become aware, just aware of what am I actually cooking and eating, and okay, maybe I should have a focus on what I'm doing and eating.
Yeah, and you have a body type, you know, you have a body, mind, constitutional type that once you're aware of, there's really no going back. You know, then you have this understanding that everything impacts you either positively or negatively based upon your body type. So, you know, what's therapeutic for you, Max, might be poison for me because we have different body types. And so that's a core element of the Ayurveda perspective.
Do you think this applies in general to diets? Because, right, a lot of people debate, should you eat Ayurveda, should you eat vegan, keto, paleo? And you see in every category, you see people who look super fit and healthy. And everybody's like, see, I'm right. But you can see healthy people in every category. So maybe everybody is different. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you know, I don't think there's any one diet that's perfect for everybody. I would say that it needs to be personalized. You know, there's even like the blood type diet, there's keto, there's vegan, there's vegetarian, there's paleo.
Metabolic typing.
Yeah, and I would say that some of them work for some individuals, but certainly not all of them. The closest that I've seen to being accurate for all people is the Ayurvedic diet because it is personalized. So there's not one diet, but I would say that there's 3 general diets to address the 3 major body types. And it just works. And again, that's been around for thousands of years. It's all about creating balance. It's a more energetic approach. So from my standpoint, it makes a lot of sense. I will say that I have found a lot of benefit from an allergy elimination challenge diet, which isn't so much of a diet as it is a tool to identify how you react to certain foods. And so the allergy elimination challenge is a diet that usually takes weeks, if not months, where you basically eliminate all of your foods and you start introducing foods back in one by one and seeing how you respond to them. And over time, you can figure out, you know, am I sensitive to foods or does this food work for me specifically? So yeah, diets, it's endlessly fascinating. Yeah, again, you know, everybody talks about like we should eat more salad, but for my body type, salad is poison. You know, it's
Well,
rich.
what is your Ayurveda type, your body
So
type?
I'm a Vata. So Vata is composed of 2 elements, which are air and space. And so I'm lacking water, fire, and earth. And so to create balance in my body type, I need to consume the water, the fire, and the earth that I'm lacking. So if I'm consuming more of what's already innate in me, it's just going to push me more out of balance. And so leafy greens, they are lacking fire, water, earth. You know, they are floating out in space, and they are the essence of air and space. And so eating leafy greens for me is just adding, you know, insult to injury, as it would be.
I was doing autoimmune paleo reset diet. It sounds similar to what you described, where I would cut out, I don't know, 80-90% of foods for a month or so. And then every week I would add like, okay, this week I'm going to add onions and then see how my body reacts to onions. And then the next week, I don't know, bell peppers or something. And that was pretty good to do. I felt like it was pretty clearing. And what I also noticed, so in the past I would eat a lot of gluten and bread and pasta, and I'd never felt like I had any problems with it. But at one point I started not eating gluten, eating gluten-free. And now when I eat, I don't know, a tiny piece of gluten, I will get a stomach pain and headache within 10 minutes. So it also seems to me that your body can react differently when you change your diet. So because I left out gluten, now I'm very sensitive to it suddenly.
Yeah, and it sounds like you uncovered your sensitivity. And so, people will adapt over time. And so they don't even know that they're sensitive to a certain food. But if you give the body a moment to rest, relax, recover, regenerate, you tend to uncover those sensitivities so that adaptation is lost. And then you introduce that food back in and you react violently. So that's a common phenomenon.
So let's talk about Qualia Synbiotic. It's a new product you guys launched. Tell us, what was the idea behind it, the story? Because I knew you guys always have like a lot of science behind it and a lot of reason why you do the product. So I'm excited to learn more.
Yeah, I mean, we are looking at the category and looking at the products that are available, and we weren't very impressed, honestly. I mean, what you find in the marketplace are just simple probiotics, and I would say that generally speaking, the probiotics that are in the marketplace right now are at best B class or C class probiotics. They are not A class. They generally will not provide a very strong benefit to the human body. So we were unimpressed, and we just felt like we could do better. We researched over 140 ingredients. We looked at all of the science on every ingredient. We rated it on a scale of 0 to 5. Then we took all of the ones that have a 5 that are, very effective, and we put them into different formulations.
And this 1 to 5 was based on the study data that was out there? Or?
It is, yeah. And our science team is very good at reading and interpreting the data. And so a lot of it is based on intuition and judgment. So when you step back and you look at what data do we have in front of us, how do you rate that? But we, those 140 ingredients, every one of those had a ranking. And so, we first looked at capsules. We looked at what we could do with a capsule, and we knew that we were bound. You can't put a lot of powder into a capsule, maybe 500 milligrams, 600 milligrams.
Just because of the size?
Because of the size, yeah. And we didn't want to create a product that was 10, 12 capsules per day. And so
I already have my 20 other capsules from Qualia products.
We didn't want to add to your complexity or regimen, Max. And so we immediately moved into a powder. And so we went into the lab, we taste tested a bunch of ingredients, and we found the ones that covered most of the bases that we wanted in a way that dissolved into liquid, and that were giving us the efficacy that we wanted. And so then we landed on a couple different formulas, which we tested. We always do beta tests before we launch a product to make sure that the product is safe, tolerable, and efficacious. And then we chose the product that people like the taste of, and that was proven to be efficacious. And so that's.
So what were the effects that you could see in the beta study?
Oh yeah, so the beta study was we always start small, and then we move into bigger, more well-designed studies. So the beta study was 36 individuals. They all had some degree of digestive complaints. They took Qualia Synbiotic for 15 days, about 2 weeks, and they did a digestive...
Every day, or...?
They did it every day for 15 days. And we had them do a digestive questionnaire before they started the regimen, as well as after they started doing the regimen. And we're using validated questionnaires that are used clinically, that are used in a lot of studies.
And they didn't change the diet or lifestyle?
We didn't recommend any other changes beyond just taking the product. And so overall, what we saw is that during those 15 days, people had about a 68% decrease in their symptoms, which is remarkable. We saw that it impacted the upper digestive system as well as the lower digestive system. Mm-hmm. Symptoms that were improved were abdominal discomfort, the quality of the stools, indigestion, and upper GI discomfort. Those are the major endpoints that we saw that were quite impressive. Over 90% of participants thought the product was good or excellent, and over 90% said they would continue taking the product. So for us, that was a super positive beta study showing that we have a viable product. And so, of course, we're in the process now of designing much larger studies that are double-blind, placebo-controlled. We're hoping that'll, double up on the success of the pilot, as well as expand it into some new areas, especially getting into brain function. We do find that because that relationship of the gut-brain axis, it's important that we're testing that to show benefit for the brain. But generally speaking, it does take a somewhat longer time to have that brain effect. And so I think over the course of 1 month, maybe 2 months, we're going to get a pretty strong brain effect as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, I've tried it. I must say my digestion is pretty well. So I couldn't notice any difference because it's on a high level. Because I know the foods, I've worked on it for some years now. I know what I eat to feel good. But I can say the taste is good and had no side effects. So that's my experience so far after trying it a couple of days.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And we've been getting a lot of positive results. Obviously, benefits with the GI tract, benefits with mood, benefits with sleep. So I think everybody's different. Everybody's starting point from their microbiome is different. But I like the technology that we've built into it. And I think it's very different than what's in the marketplace. The prebiotic. So,
well, what do you think is the main difference between what's already out there and Qualia Synbiotic?
Oh, where to start? I mean, just if you look at the probiotics, so the formula has prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics, fermented foods, digestive enzymes. We put in Celastris, which we have in some of our nootropic products to just give some energy to the mind state. But when you look at, as an example, the prebiotics, we have a blend of 4 different prebiotics that are in there that help to create greater diversity. And these are all FODMAP friendly. So what we find in the marketplace presently are a lot of FOS, XOS, inulin. These aren't...
Can you explain FODMAP for people who never heard that?
Yeah, so FODMAP is, it's a type of sugar that over time, it's a fermented prebiotic that over time people do react to pretty violently. Not everybody reacts to FODMAP foods, but FODMAP is, the F in FODMAP stands for fermentable. The O means oligosaccharides, the D is disaccharides, the M monosaccharides, and then the P is the polyols, which are sugar alcohols. And so that really encompasses this very broad class of prebiotics that people with sensitive digestive tracts really want to avoid. And so I would say that people that are very sensitive to fiber and prebiotic fibers should avoid FODMAP fibers.
So that's also the type that's like in erythritol and xylitol and these sugar alternatives for keto? Yeah. Well, so what I noticed, my digestion gets worse when I eat like too many keto snacks, things with these fake sugars in there. Then I noticed like, okay, my body doesn't like that.
And it's for exactly that reason. The body just creates a very strong fermentation reaction. People have a lot of gas and bloating and indigestion when they consume those things.
So that's the FODMAP, and that's in the other products often.
Exactly. And so we wanted to choose fibers that were FODMAP friendly. We did put in a pretty interesting blend, which I can talk about all day long. One of the ingredients that I love are a resistant starch from potato. And this is kind of this ancient fiber that is now lacking in the diet by and large, but it has an interesting property where it's insoluble, so it moves through your GI tract, but then it actually has properties of a soluble fiber in the colon where it ferments. And so it really is very direct in terms of how it feeds the bacteria in the colon. And we know that it can help increase the short chain fatty acids that are critically important as a byproduct in that fermentation process. So that's the prebiotic. Prebiotics are very interesting. They're emerging as probably as important as probiotics, or maybe even more important than probiotics. So that was a big emphasis of the formula. We did look at probiotics, and we looked at what we could do differently than what's on the marketplace. And I will say that probably 95% of the probiotic strains that are in the marketplace presently are Lactobacillus bifidobacteria. And again, those just really aren't the best strains for the human body. By and large, they just don't arrive alive. And so they don't even meet the definition of a probiotic. Mm-hmm. And so we intentionally chose to use spore probiotics, which are an entirely different type of probiotics, pretty unique to the marketplace, but we're starting to see some gains. They're starting to get some distribution right now. But we really like the science of these spore-forming bacteria. There's a lot of historical evidence. They've been used forever, but they have the property of that they're very, very stable. And so you can heat them up, you can manufacture with them, they pass through the GI tract, they always arrive alive in the small intestine. And then they exert a very strong effect within the intestinal tract as well. They are temporary, they're not permanent. So they usually stick around for 2 to 3 weeks, but within that 2 to 3 week window, they exert a very strong effect. So, so we blended 3 different spores in the formula as well.
Wow. So it seems like, yeah, like you say, you're really trying to create a completely different product and create basically the quality leader like you did with the other Qualia products in each category. Yeah.
Yeah. And the intent really is just to give the body a gentle nudge. You know, we don't want to create drastic shifts in the microbiome. That's very uncomfortable. Most people will return the product immediately when they have that experience. So we wanted just to give the body a nudge to move in a positive direction. And so that really was the intent. Some of the things that were missing in the modern diet, we wanted to supply, and not in a massive dose, but in a dose that's usable day in and day out.
Wonderful. Yeah, I will keep trying it and see how it compounds, because I'm pretty sure I'm not eating the same food as the hunter-gatherers in Tanzania. I'm definitely lacking something, especially here in Estonia. It's quite hard to get organic food so far. So yeah, I'm happy I will continue to use that. Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. Make sure you give this thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more awakening and longevity content. And if you want to try out Qualia Synbiotic, you can go to neurohacker.com, use my coupon code MAXHACK to get 15% of your order. And I really dig the company Neurohacker. I've been working with their products and their team for many years now. And you can also check out the interview with James Schmachtenberger, who's the founder and CEO of Neurohacker Collective, about really the story of how they created Neurohacker Collective, which I think is really a fascinating company, and they make the highest quality supplements in the market. Sending you much love from Estonia.